Good morning, students. So today in this chapter, we are going to see a detailed study of malware. We study various kinds of malware, including worms, viruses, trojans, and bots. Then we identify several novel features of malware and their many factors of propagation. Then some malwares are activated by human intervention. Example, the click of an infected email attachment or a visit to a website hosting malicious code. On the other hand, internet scanning worms spread automatically without human intervention. Then recently, another type of malware called bots have received much press. An army of compromised computers or bots under the control of a single master is referred to as botnets. Botnets have been used for sending spam mail, launching distributed denial of service attacks, and in identity thefts. So we'll see brief introduction about these four, and then we'll go for the detailed study of it. So viruses and worms both refer to malware that replicate themselves. A virus latches itself onto an executable file or program, while a worm is typically a standalone program. A virus infects a file and uses it as a host from which to infect other files, while a worm spread from one computer to another computer. Next, a Trojan horse, or simply a Trojan, is a program with a malicious component masquerading as a useful piece of software. Trojans do not replicate. Trojan is typically activated by action on the part of victim. So this is what exactly a brief introduction about the four. So we'll see in detail one by one. So first we'll go for virus and worm features. First is a virus characteristics and next is a worm characteristics. So first is a virus characteristics. So when a virus infected program is run, the virus code is executed first. One of the first tasks of virus code is to seek other programs not yet infected and then pass on the infection to one or more of them. A truly malicious virus may then perform actions such as deleting certain files. An innocuous virus may attempt something benign like printing a hello world message. Execution of the virus code is usually followed by the execution of the host original program. All the virus code need not to be located at the start of the infected file. In some cases, virus code is both prepended and appended to the host file. Virus code could be split into several segments and interspersed throughout the infected file using jump statement at the end of each virus segment. So to evade detection, some viruses modify file service interrupt handler that returns attribute of files. By doing so, the service handler may be programmed to return the uninfected length of the file. Another technique is to use compression so that the length of the infected file remains the same as the length of its original version. The virus writer includes a compression routine in the viral code. To infect another file, the virus first compresses that file and then prepends the virus code to the compressed file. So one of the characteristic features of many viruses is the set of system calls they make. System calls are used by application programs to request services of the operating system. They are made to read or write files, swamp new processes, establish TCP connections, etc. Some viruses make calls to copy their own code to other files, create or modify entries in the Windows registry, or search for email. Such suspicious calls are often used to distinguish malicious code from the benign code. So these are some characteristics of the viruses. Next we'll see worm characteristics. Then that first one is the classes and features. So worms are most commonly classified based on their vector of propagation. The main categories include the internet scanning worms, email worms, peer-to-peer worms, web worms, mobile worms. So we'll see in detail these categories of the worms later. First, we will discuss the features of the worm. So the first feature is enhanced targeting. The most important attribute of a worm is that it spreads its infection to other computers. Many target selection strategies have been proposed and implemented. So here main category or the main task of the worm is that how does a worm know who to target next? So for that they have implemented and proposed many target selection strategies. Worms that spread through email, for example, have an easy way to figure out their targets. All they need to do is to look into their victim's mail box or email address book to find a set of targets. A mobile worm obtains phone numbers of its potential victims from the phone book in the cell phone hosting the worm. Some web worms use search engines to harvest URLs of potentially vulnerable targets. Internet scanning worms, on the other hand, scan the IP address space for vulnerable machines. The most straightforward approach is random scanning, that is choosing IP addresses at random. So this was adopted by Code Red version 1. However, Code Red version 2 adopted localized scanning. For 80% of the time, it attempted to connect to victims with whom it shared the network address. This strategy was more successful since hosts in the same network are likely to be closer and be running the same software. Worms like Nimda, unleashed in September 2001, spread aggressively thanks to its 5 different vectors of propagation. Propagation through HTTP and email were particularly successful in penetrating the perimeter of the enterprise. Once inside, it exploited the Windows file sharing features to spread within the enterprise. So the next feature of worm is enhanced speed. To enhance the infection rate, some worms are designed to spam multiple threads. Each thread is responsible for setting up connections to different subsets of hosts, thus increasing the rate at which infection is spread. Some worms reduce infection latency by targeting a buffer overflow vulnerability on an application that employs UDP rather than TCP. TCP connection establishment involves a 3-way handshake and it is a time consuming. Whereas UDP by contrast is a connection less, so it is not a time consuming. So this sharply reduces infection latency. A steep increase in the number of infected machines at very outset of a worm epidemic has a multiplicative effect on spreading rate. So for this purpose, the attacker could create one or more hit lists carrying addresses of several thousand vulnerable machines. The first worm to be let loose could carry one such list. As a worm infects each new machine, it splits its list between itself and the machine it has just affected. Given that the most of the machines on the hit list are vulnerable, the worm spreads rapidly during the initial stage of the epidemic. Thereafter, the infected machines could spread the infection using random scanning or some other spreading methods. So the third feature of worm is enhanced capabilities. Most worms and viruses have unique and distinct signature. That is a pattern of bits, usually assembly language code, which appears in all instances of the worm. Worms and virus signatures are the key to detecting them. However, there are sophisticated code of of obfuscation techniques to evade detection. One such technique is the use of encryption for disguising worm code. Different instances of the worm may use different keys for encryption. Thus, they might fail to match any existing worm signature. Such worms are said to be polymorphic. A polymorphic worm would have to be decrypted before being executed. This suggests that a decryptor routine in the clear would have to be part of the worm code. So here decryptors themselves may be very simple, involving XOR operations or a trivial shift-based substitutions. However, detecting a worm on the assumption that the decryptor routine is invariant would not always be succeed. So in the next figure, we are going to see the two versions of assembly code that look like different but performs the same function. So in that, second version is efficient with spurious instructions. Then second version also has a spurious branch instruction to confuse worm code detection software that relies on control flow analysis. Worms that have multiple such versions with or without relying on encryption are referred to as metamorphic worms. Now, if you see here, the task is that if the value of a register file is greater than 0, then perform R1 plus R2 and store the result in R4. If the value of a register file is not greater than 0, then perform 4 multiplied by R2 plus 3 multiplied by R3 and store the result in R4. Now, if you see the version first, over here, it's a simple. So, if the value of a R4 is 0, if it is less than 0, then jump to the second where it has performed this task, that is 4 into R2 plus 3 into R3 by using some of the assembly instructions. If the value of the R5 is greater than 0, then perform the first one and jump it to finish. But the same code, if you see in the version 5, it has used some XOR, add, sub, add, means same furious instruction. It has used multiple number of times, which detects that it is a worm code in the program. Then the last feature of the worm is enhanced destructive power. It is estimated that worms such as CodeRed and Nimda caused billions of dollars in damage. Analysts estimate cost based on lost productivity, cleanup cost, system downtime, which affects business and revenues. Fast spreading worms also caused severe network congestion problems, disrupting normal internet traffic and contributing to system DOS time. Nevertheless, most worms thus far have been relatively benign. Some worms contributed attack packets to distributed denial of service attack or caused website defacement. The witty worm, which appeared in March 2004, however, was qualitatively different. It was the first worm to carry a destructive payload, deleted a random section of the victim's hard disk, leading to a system crash. So next one, we'll see the categories of the worms. So already we have seen there are 4 or 5 categories the worms have been classified. So first one is the internet scanning worms. One characteristic of internet scanning worm is that they are self-activated. The ability to spread without human intervention distinguishes them from the most types of email, peer-to-peer, and web forms. This category of worm is so called because they scan the internet looking for vulnerable machines. The vulnerability could be a buffer overflow problem in a commonly used service provided by a particular version of an operating system. The worm communicates with and delivers its malicious payload to the victim using standard transfer protocols such as TCP or UDP. Once installed on the victim, it could erase local files, steal secrets, or deface web pages, but above all, it seeks new victims to infect. So, case studies. So, there are two types of case studies we are seeing for this internet scanning worm, Code Red and a Slammer. First, we'll see the Code Red. One of the best known example of internet scanning worm is the Code Red worm, which received a lot of press because of the considerable damage it brought. It all started on June 18, 2001 when a buffer overflow vulnerability was discovered in the Microsoft IIS web server. A patch for this vulnerability was developed a few days later. It is estimated that there were several million IIS servers in active deployment. Even assuming that a large percentage of these were patched, that still left plenty of room for the spread of the worm, which was unleashed on July 12, 2001. The worm itself was carried in HTTP request messages targeting at IIS servers. The first version of the worm used a random number generator to generate new addresses of machines to infect. However, the same seed was used for the random number generator in every instance of the worm. So the infection phase continued until July 20th, at which point the worm moved to attack phase. At this point, until July 28th, they launched a denial of service attack on www.whitehouse.government. They also defaced web pages with the face hacked by Chinese. A few weeks after the launch of Code Red 1, the Code Red 2 was released. The Code Red 2 installed a backdoor providing an attacker remote administrator level access to the victim. Code Red 2 persisted on disk. It swamped several hundred threads. Each thread sent probe packets to several targets. So only about 12% of the addresses it generated were random. The rest were biased towards machine within its own subnet. So second one is a Slammer. The SQL Slammer was launched on 25th January 2003 and the targeted a buffer overflow vulnerability on the Microsoft SQL Server 2000. The worm sent packets on UDP port 1434, the database software resolution service. It is used simple random scanning to propagate. Slammer's payload was a mere 384 bytes in length, far smaller than 4 KB payload of Code Red. Also, UDP being a connectionless protocol, there is no overhead of connection establishment. So next one, it's a worm propagation model. So one of the most alarming aspect of some of the worms developed since 2001 is the speed at which they infect their victims. And here we are going to see two types of models based on the speed rate. First one is a simple epidemic model. Second one is a Kermack-McKendrick model. So first one is a simple epidemic model, which is used to study the spread of infectious diseases among humans, is an appropriate starting point. The model assumes that there are only two types of entities in the population. Either it is an individual who is susceptible or he is infected. An infected individual can infect a susceptible person. Once infected, a person remains infected and does not recover. So let n be the size of total population. Let I of t be the number of infected individuals at time t. The number of susceptibles at time t is then n minus I of t. Beta is the initial infection rate, that is, each infected person attempts to pass on the infection to beta susceptibles in one time unit. The following differential equation captures the number of infected persons at time t. The d of I is equal to b into I of t into 1 minus I of t divided by n, differentiation at the time t, or it can be also represented as beta dt is equal to differentiation of I of t divided by I of t into 1 minus I of t divided by n. In an infinite population, each infected person infects beta dt susceptibles in time interval dt. However, in a finite population of size n, the probability that the target of an infective is already infected is I of t divided by n. Such targets do not add to the population of newly infected. The factor 1 minus I of t divided by n in the above equation ensures that only previously uninfected entities are added to the count of the freshly infected in time interval dt. So integrating both the sides yields, so this equation, that is 19.3. So next one is a Kermack-McKendrick model, or shortly called as KM model. More accurately models the spread of human infectious disease by considering three categories of people. Those who are susceptible, we call it state as yes. Those who are infectious, state as a I. And those who are neither, means individual who are cured or those who have succumbed to the disease, that is terminal T. Initially, all individuals in the population are susceptible, and it is possible to go from state I to state yes to I, but not vice versa. Now here, if you see the first figure, initially all the individuals are in state yes, that is those all are susceptible. Then individual from susceptible may go into the I state. I is nothing but an infected state, but not vice versa. So infected person cannot go into the susceptible state. This is what a first figure indicates. So in the second figure, once the infected person is there, he may cure, that is, an infectious person may or may not be cured. If it is cured, he is never again vulnerable to the disease. So the transition state from I to T corresponds to an infected machine being patched. So here, infected machines being patched and it has cured. So that is what KM model. Also, such a machine is never again vulnerable to the code red infection. So while this KM model better explains the spread of code red compared to the simple epidemic model, but it still falls short. Its implicit assumptions are at variance with the speed of internet scanning worms. In particular, machines that are susceptible but not infectious may also be patched. The infection rate beta is network dependent. The KM model assumes that the rate of transitioning from the infectious to the terminal state is a constant, that is gamma. So a state diagram of a model that factors the patching of a susceptible machines is shown in a figure 19.3. If you see here, from S to I to P1, that is patch has been done and the person or a machine has been cured, or from directly susceptible it may be cured by installing the patching. So this is what the today's video lecture. So in the next video we'll see what are the topological verbs.